Destined Rivals is one of the more polarizing sets from the Scarlet and Violet era. However, it does beg the question, is it worth buying right now? Though before we get into that, I'm actually gifting one subscriber this Psyduck illustration rare from Pokemon 151. Now, if I respond to your comment with this Mew emoji, then well done, this Psyduck is being sent your way. Now, Destined Rivals is a pretty big deal. Now, as a lot of you know, that Destined Rivals is actually the first time in 20 years that Team Rocket cards returned within the Pokemon's TCG. And I mean, this set was so hyped ever since we all heard of it back in early 2024. And in its own way, it does feel similar to Pokemon 151. Not so much in terms of the cards, but more so that Pokemon 151 was a revolutionized base set. And with Destined Rivals, it kind of feels like a revolutionized Team Rocket set. Now, in all honesty, I have to admit that Destined Rivals is one of the coolest sets I've seen. And I do know most collectors have very positive things to say about it. Though I suppose one of the key areas I want to discuss in this video is to do a bit of a deep dive within the set, compare Destined Rivals with other sets, and see what it's actually offering and the price points. So let's actually take a look at some key areas. All right, Destined Rivals booster boxes. As you can see on this graph right here, kind of has been going down from, the initial pre-release hype that happened. Destined Rivals was such an in-demand set when it was announced, man. Like, it was so hyped, right? And this is back in 2024, even before we knew anything about it. We just knew that we were getting a Team Rocket set. So it was no surprise that it was getting absurd price points. As you can see on pre-release, they were asking for $413 US, and you can see right there, 76 items sold at that price point, which is a ridiculous price for a booster box. But as you can see right there, man, you are always gonna get the potatoes in this hobby that decide to pay those price points. I mean, whatever you want to call them, potatoes, bananas, strawberries, they're fruit bowls, bro. Like, they do not know what they're doing when they're paying those prices. But thankfully, you can see that right now it's dropped to 253 US for a booster box. And I say that as thankfully. But just some personal anecdotal experience. I personally have found Destined Rivals to be a little bit easier to get than Prismatic Evolutions. And I definitely have found it a little bit easier to get when it released than Journey Together. Right now though, Journey Together, if I do go into a store, I usually see a few packs, and I don't think it was the most desired set. But we can see that I do feel that the crazy demand of what Prismatic Evolutions and how it made this benchmark, it is getting a little bit easier. And of course, you can see the Destined Rivals Elite Trainer boxes selling for 122 US, right now selling for 86 US, which I do think is an okay price point for a set that is so heavily in demand. It's definitely not the best price point you can get, but given the circumstances, I do think it is better than what we've seen previously. Now, while speaking about Destined Rivals, if you do want to be notified when the set is restocked, that does bring me to today's video sponsor, which is PokeNotify. Now, PokeNotify is a paid Discord which pings its users when a new Pokemon set is restocked or when pre-orders are available at specific retailers. Now, seeing as we have so many new Pokemon sets that are being reprinted, restocked, and on the way, for example, we all know how much in demand Destined Rivals is and also how challenging it can be to find. So by using PokeNotify, you will actually be first in line to hear about new sets. Now, for PokeNotify to work best, it's important to set up your notification preferences correctly from the start. That way, every notification you receive will be relevant to you. Now, if you do just want to try it out, there is a 3-day free trial available. And if you do use my code, you get 25% off your first month. Thanks to PokeNotify for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back into it. So moving on into some of the chase cards of the set. Now, these are pretty interesting to me, okay? Because we are kind of releasing Destined Rivals, or Destined Rivals has released in the most hyped period for Pokemon collecting. As everyone says, and everyone likes to say, during summer fill, prices go down because, people like to go to the beach more and get their dogs out. I don't know, man, but that is the case, okay? People like to, buy more Pokemon cards in the winter period. They like to sell their Pokemon cards in the summer period. It's just the natural way life works. But as you can see here, selling for $449, on pre-release. Again, potato behavior, banana behavior. What do you want to call them? Jackfruits, durians, whatever the fruit they are. They're just acting like a bowl of fruit. Then you can see it drop to around 318 US. And you can see Team Rocket's Mewtwo currently selling for 374 US. Now, the pull rates for these cards, especially the SIRs, are very challenging. So we can see the price of buying Destined Rivals is around $250 a booster box. The top chase card in the set is 374. Now, when we look at something like Prismatic Evolutions, the top chase card, the Umbreon, is very, very expensive. If you were lucky enough to pull that card, you could, sell that card and buy, pretty much a case of Prismatic Evolutions ETBs. At the moment, this is not looking like the case. In fact, we are seeing that the top chase card is decently priced, but it's not exactly double the price of the booster box. So we are seeing a bit of a weird kind of situation for Destined Rivals at the moment. Now you can see the Cynthias Garchomp had a pre-release price point of around 218 US. Right now selling for around $201. Pretty fair price point, and it's kind of maintained that 200 to 220 range. I do think that this card is really, really heavily desired, but then again, and this is where sometimes collectors make mistakes, right? They'll see that something's very desired in Japanese sets, and then they say, hey, you know what? When this comes out in the English TCG, it's just going to be as desired because you know what? We're a one-for-one market. But don't forget, the people that collect the English TCG have different preferences and different cards are more in demand. So I do think at 201 US, this card is pretty fair, but then again, the chance to pull this is very rare. But I suppose one cool thing about Destined Rivals, when we look at the set, when we're looking at other sets, okay? When we do look at Surging Sparks, you do have some lackluster SIRs, not in terms just because it's a Pokemon, but in terms of the artworks as well. For example, Archelodon, it just looks like a photo of the Pokemon put on a Pokemon card, or even the Duran. I don't think it's that much of an interesting artwork. When we look at Destined Rivals, one of the cool things is most of the SIRs, in fact, probably all of the SIRs are pretty high quality special illustration rares. You can literally pull any of the special illustration rares, and even though they may not be that wildly valuable, they are really good artworks. But then again, that's not always the case with every other set. Now, looking at Ethan's Ho, you can see selling for $207 at pre-release, and right now selling for 140 US. Pretty significant price reduction. I'm very surprised at that price point, to be honest. That is a big price reduction. I get it, summer period. Get your dogs out at the beach. I get it. People want to have their coconut smoothies and live life. Dude, it's winter for me here. So, I cannot kind of understand, because in summer, for us in Australia, all cards just balloon up in price. But of course, around the world, it is summer for everyone else. But as you can see, 140 US for this Ho-Oh. Now, the reason why that to me is a bit interesting, Mewtwo is such a desired Pokemon, huge fan base, everyone loves it. Ho-Oh to me is a box legendary, so desired from Gen 2. It is interesting to see that it's at this price point. I do have a feeling the reason why it's like that is because I think a lot of people didn't like this artwork that much. And I spoke about this, a few months back when it got revealed, but I think a lot of people prefer Ho-Oh in its ferocious positions, kind of like when you look at the Pokemon Gold box art. I think people prefer Ho-Oh to look like that. I think when it has this kind of more majestic feel about it, people don't really gravitate to Ho-Oh that much in that kind of artwork, and you can see the price point for that. I do wonder if, Ho-Oh had a bit more of a position where it was like using Sacred Fire and, you could see it all bursted up in flames. Would that have a bigger price point in the market if it kind of did an artwork more like that, kind of like the original in 2000? Who knows? But we can see that currently the market isn't responding to this card and throwing their money at it. Same thing when we're looking at the Moltres. You can see selling for 151 US, right now selling for 130. Interesting thing, this Team Rocket's Moltres. I do know back in Sword and Shield, the Galarian Moltres was pretty heavily desired, dude. In Chill and Rain, that was a top chase card. And it did have a big moment where it was spiking up in price and then coming down in value as well. But then again, when I'm looking at the Moltres right now, I do think selling for 130 US is okay. I don't think it's the most cheapest card, but then again, considering where Pokemon card prices have been heading, I think this is kind of healthy for the market. I did talk about Prismatic Evolutions in a previous video, and I said one of my issues with Prismatic Evolutions is that it just decided that every card would be worth, more than $300. Every evolution, you're just going to be worth more than 300 US. And the reason that never made sense to me is because before Prismatic Evolutions, we had two cards that ever got past 300 US. It was Greninja and the Pikachu. And then Prismatic Evolutions comes on board and everyone just goes, wow, all these new Scarlet and Violet era cards, only two cards before that in this era have got to those price points. All our evolutions are going to get these price points. So I do think this is a bit more in the realms of what's normal in this hobby, if you want to use that word. So I do wonder how it's going to behave, but then again, 130, I don't think it's too bad. Now, looking at the Houndoom illustration rare, you can see pre-release price selling for 38 US, but you can see the illustration rare has now dropped down to 21 US, which I do think is a pretty good price for an illustration rare. But then again, Houndoom as well is a desired Pokemon from Gen 2. A lot of fan demand, a lot of big fan bases. But then again, I do think when you have so much product coming out, so many of these artworks coming out, people are getting a bit fatigued. And, you know, it's hard for everyone just to be like, hey, I'm going to spend 30 US or 20 US or even 50 US on all these cards, because it does pile up, okay? It does get quite expensive. So I think people are becoming a little bit more strategic with what they buy. Now, the Nidoking SIR selling for 108 on pre-release, went down to around 90 and currently selling for 95 US. I think that is pretty good price for a Nidoking. And to be honest, it's actually surprised me a little bit. I think that is more than I expected for the Nidoking SIR than I kind of anticipated. Because when I looked at this and I look at some other special illustration rares from previous sets, I didn't really think that the Nidoking would be getting close to 100 US. Pretty cool, especially for people that love Nidoking. I know it's got a big fan base, but you know what? I have to admit that price point is pretty interesting. In terms of, is it worth to buy Destined Rivals? When you look at the price point and you look at these, sure, if you pull the Mewtwo, it's good, but don't forget that it is quite common to pull illustration rares, and you know, all their values add up. Now, it depends on how you kind of like purchasing your Pokemon cards. I do get it that some people don't care about the value. That is cool as well, but you know, because Pokemon booster boxes are so expensive at the moment, I do think people are being a bit more strategic with what they buy. And of course, we can see Team Rocket's Crobat selling for pre-release 167 USD. Right now selling for 64 USD. Definitely a big price reduction. I actually expected the Crobat to be more in demand than the Nidoking. Is that a hot take? I mean, to me, the Crobat was more interesting. I'm actually really kind of I was surprised, to be honest, to see this at 64 US and the Nidoking at 95. To me, I would have actually reversed these because I think this is the cool artwork. But then again, the market decides. I don't decide anything, okay? I just like these artworks. But then again, you can see 64 US for this, I think is a good price. And of course, you can see Ethan's Typlohsion going through some interesting price waves, selling for 36 US, went up to 53, right now selling for 42 US. A little bit of volatility. But then again, when I think of Destined Rivals, I do think it is a bit of a volatile set for the singles at the moment. I am very interested to see where the Team Rocket's Mewtwo in particular is going to go. Is it going to become one of the most expensive chase cards from the Scarlet and Violet era? We do know that the Black and White set is apparently the final set of the Scarlet and Violet era. Now, no real confirmation on that. A lot of people have just assumed that because Legends EA is releasing. And of course, if you do like, you know, Pokemon video games and all that, I have made a second YouTube channel covering Pokemon video games called Philip's Trick Room. Definitely feel free to check it out if you do like my content. But I am wondering whether or not that the end of the Scarlet and Violet era is here. I don't know. We're going to have to see it towards the end of the year if that's the official case, because a lot of people think that the Black and White set is the finale set. Because when I do look at Black Bolt and White Flare, it does remind me of a bit of a finale set for the Pokemon TCG. So we will see what happens. And of course, we can see the Zamazenta illustration rare as well, selling for $6.25, went up to $8.50. Right now selling for $6, you know, same thing as well. I know the Zacian from Journey Together didn't perform like I expected, but then we can see the Zamazenta also isn't performing that well as well. Is it because people aren't just that nostalgic for the Sword and Shield legendaries at the moment? That could be a case, but then again, to me, that's a pretty good price point as well. But you know, Destined Rivals right now, I think it is a very interesting set. I think it is in demand, but then again, I know people are just questioning what they buy at this stage a little bit more than they did previously. And I think with so many sets coming out, people are just pausing at the moment. I do know it's tough times in the hobby. I know it's tough times economically. So I know that people are probably thinking twice before they purchase sets. But when I'm looking at this, I think Destined Rivals, within 6 to 12 months, we will get a more clear picture of where this set is heading. Because right now, it is a little bit volatile and you kind of don't know where it's going to go. Because as you can see with these graphs, some cards were spiking high in price, some cards were spiking low. You never know where it's going to travel. Though I think Destined Rivals looks as if it is a good set. However, when we do a price analysis, it starts looking a little bit touch and go. And I think waiting a few months is probably one of the better decisions when it comes to purchasing newer sets. However, one thing that Destined Rivals teaches us is that collecting Pokemon cards has a bit of a lesson to learn. And you know, a lot of people ask me, hey Phil, what are some of the most common mistakes when collecting Pokemon cards? And I do reveal the 5 biggest mistakes in this video right here. Within this video, I go over the 5 most common mistakes when it comes to collecting Pokemon and investing in Pokemon cards. Click the video that's appearing on screen to learn more about it there, and I'll see you on the next video.